no, everybody ends. That's why on that, I don't think you just said, well, 35% didn't want this, probably anyone because 31 wanted it. I think that's the right approach to demand. Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's terrible.
Yeah, we couldn't hear a thing actually.
Very sorry. I'll just type
Surprisingly,
something,
now it's
a
good.
summary. Of course it is. Well, I already spent I already blew my load talking about that whole thing. It was a lovely speech. You would have loved it. A tear would have come to your eye.
I heard.
All right,
I
well,
just
if it's
heard
good
that
now, I'll just
American stuff. That's all. No, I'm just joking. No, I
Okay.
I heard you say. I heard you say basically, and you made a good point of, look, in these instances, the non-majority is winning. So if, yes, there might be 33 people that want a 60-40, but if you add up the other two, it's like a 52. So essentially the non-majority, and why aren't we getting to a position where it's a majority of the group? And even with previous poll, and it was, let's say 17-18, but if you account for those four, then if, 18 won, that means that it's 21 that didn't want what the 18 wanted. So in a sense, that's a majority as well.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And
got the gist. That's right.
yeah. And I did like that aspect, and it comes into, you're right, ranked choice. And there are some states, and I like the idea of ranked choice, where, hey, if you aren't reaching a solid majority, I do, yeah, I guess my only hesitation would be that, we didn't have a structure yet for ranked choice voting, and it's slightly, even on the last, if I understand it correctly, it's basically like you do a voting round, and if you don't have a solid majority by one choice, then you take, kind of like what we did in that other one, you take one of those choices out and redo the vote, and then until you get essentially a super majority.
Similar to, I'm sure a few years ago there was a Georgia senatorial race. Again, God damn it.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'll just do a quick Google. Voters rank candidates, first choice, second choice. If a candidate receives over 50% of the first choice votes, they win. So Georgia's Senate had a runoff vote, yeah. So if they receive 50% of all the votes, they win. Otherwise, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. So if you're doing A, B, and C, and A, B, or C is voted on, and there's not 50% of the votes for any one of those, you start pulling away the least vote until you get down to one vote with more than 50%. 1 second, guys. I just got to answer the phone real quick. I'll be right back. All right. Sorry, I'm back. So Edward's saying Georgia's senators had a runoff vote. Ranked choice does the same thing, but all in a single round. We can't do that in a Discord voting, correct? Ranked choice is how Australia and other places do it, and runoff elections, the same process over multiple elections. In our case, if we could do preference ranked voting with the second choice of all the people who voted for B would be applied. If we could do a preference, I'm not sure that last sentence, I don't fully understand that, but well, I think we ranked choice and runoff are the same thing, yeah. And Edward, I'm correct in understanding that a ranked choice is basically, you basically pull out the least voted for and you do multiple rounds until one vote has more than 50% of the majority of votes. Is that right? Yes, pull out the lowest vote and reapply those votes to the voter's second choice. Right. if what just real quick, what he's saying is when you vote, you could actually vote multiple votes. So you could say, I want A and B, and if A falls out, your A vote then goes to B if that's your second up. I don't know if Discord can do that, but it'd be very similar to just pulling out the least one and then rerunning the vote. Right. You would number your choices in rank preference rounds. Let's see. Wait for Mr. Storm and Edward. What I meant was to calculate a weighted average of the vote, which is 69%. I don't think we have the option to do ranked voting in that aspect on Discord, or even course, because I think we discussed that once, but it would, we could run second votes if we wanted to implement that. I mean, my thing is just like, again, it adds to the delay of, it just makes things longer, which, if we go back to understanding that we won't be perfect, but we want to try to be a little speedy, the question is, do we want to readjust that? But that's kind of, I mean, I kind of figured this was going to happen. That's kind of why I was hoping that we as a group could just agree on 70-30, because it's really, I think, suffices both of those groups. But now, it's most likely going to end up in a split. It's just how perfect of a percentage do we want that split to be? Mr. Storm, can you explain that a little bit? 69% is the nearest opinion of everyone.
Yeah, I don't know if you are familiar with the weighted averages, but it's like you take the average of every vote and then you get 69%. It's not very difficult to calculate in an Excel sheet.
Oh, so you're saying, I see what you're saying. So you're saying if we did 69% for Shimmer and 21%, if you're taking all these votes, this is essentially the weighted average over the whole thing.
Yeah.
I see what you're
Because
saying.
then everyone will be not too pissed off. But for me, either 40 or 80% works. I don't think it matters that much, but I don't think we should use too much. But just document how we calculated it and then go for it.
What do you think, Saphir?
I think the problem was that we didn't clearly define the term beforehand. So at this point, I like Storm's idea. It seems the most fair with how the chips fell. The question is, now do we have a vote to go weighted average or just accept the simple majority? It's a problem because in any scenario, we're going to piss a bunch of people. And we want to make sure that the community's views are respected. And because this was the largest turnout by far of any vote that we've had to date, it's even more contentious. Yeah, it's true. If we do go with the least popular option.
I'm not actually. I don't actually agree because it's a continuum. It's not three different persons. You can't compare this with a vote in an election. I mean,
I also kind of I also kind of, I don't think it's necessarily least popular. I think it's like, let's say someone wanted 60-40 and they got 69, what would that be, 31. They may be like, shit, I wanted 60-40, but, 69's, I wanted 40%, but I got 31%. Well, it's not that bad. Versus, damn, I wanted 40% and I got half at 20%, and vice versa. I wanted 80 and I got cut down to 60 versus I wanted 80 and I got 69. What I do think, though, is we try to make a vote on where we want to conclude on this vote, and then maybe while we're waiting on the technical stuff, we start to get a little bit more structured. Yes, I agree. That's what I was trying to get to. Simple majority or weighted average. So oil, well, I don't know. I think we would have to also do, we're going to have to do all three votes.
Yeah, because now the problem is we're running a vote again instead of, and then all of a sudden we're not eliminating the least popular choice again. So.
Are we okay with voting with weighted average or run a second round with only two options? Not necessarily. B's kind of the weighted average, but as Mr. Storm's saying, the weighted average is, it would be 69% Shimmer and 31% Iota. And then, or we do a runoff between 60-40 and 80-20. Yeah, I really do see that. To me, then you're getting these polarized opposites, and people are going to be like pissed off more, the ones that don't win at the end, regardless if it's 50 plus 1%.
I've got a thought, and maybe this softens the blow a little bit on the heavy IOTA distribution, just because we do know that, like Edward said during the last call, like some of the distribution is extremely top heavy to the point where it's absurd on some of the IOTA wallet addresses. Deep Sea, I remember you had mentioned quadratic voting back in the day to try and make it a little bit more fair and distributed, so that way the little guy doesn't get completely outvoted by the bigger fish. I know it introduces like a lot of different concepts, but say we settle on the 60-40 because it was frankly just like the most chosen outcome, and I guess that was our fault for not defining the terms better or giving 3 options in a vote. We go with that. The next question is about the distribution. Is it a simple linear distribution, or do we layer in some sort of quadratic voting type? So the little guys also do get to benefit and have a stake in this, as opposed to a big chunk of these tokens just going to the IF. Because we know that's what's going to happen. Like as soon as more of this percentage goes to IOTA, there will be a large chunk of these tokens that go to the IF. So food for thought.
So
if we do
that's
stick with the 60-40.
yeah. Let me talk about 2 things there. One, the quadratic voting. Yeah, it's definitely the way to go. However, it can be gamed unless you solve the identity problem. And there's actually some really great solutions going on with that. And that's really what I wanted to really focus on over the second year. And of course, got smashed for that because God forbid something actually work on a community equal basis and not give someone too much voting power. And really the whole point is that some whale can break their stack up into smaller chunks because the smaller people get a higher weighted number of votes. And the way you get around that is, I can't remember the name, but you get these badges and you're essentially, they were able to do our mathematical analysis. And I mean, they were down to like a bell curve where only something like 5 to 10% in the middle, they couldn't tell if we're bots or humans. But the majority, the 90% of addresses, and these are just DLT addresses, they can tell, hey, this is a human, this isn't, these multiple addresses are tied to this person, etc. But it's those 10% that they were working on and struggling. But, with the advances in AI, I'm sure that's down even closer. Okay, that brings up the other thing, because I asked this once to Garrett. I was worried about that's the exact thing is, hey, the IF has so much weight, and then they would have voting, and then again, you essentially have a decentralized unit being manipulated by a central authority. On top of that, sorry, go ahead. So that's, yeah, right. So that is what Garrett had said is that, oh, well, the IF isn't going to get TAN tokens. The problem is, how do you know directly what they hold? Because I know for sure they even use some special things that split up their addresses so no one could really see what they're spending their money on. I mean, almost no one in the IF knows. And of course, it's all done by one person. You could assume who. But it would be very hard to find those particular addresses, I believe. Could get maybe a lot of them, maybe 70% or whatever. One thing that I believe is for certain is, as I know, they sold most of their shimmer during the launch. Not all of it, of course, but most of it to fund until they can inflate the supply and basically refund themselves. So there is that aspect of the fact is that they had not a massive amount of shimmer tokens and thus would be a much lower risk of having voting control.